So Vic, Sibilla, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for being here. We actually kind of go back.
We go
Uh,
back. We go
we go
back.
back. And you actually listened to the panelist webcast that we did. And you're like, oh my gosh, I would love to do this. And it
Yes.
just so happened that all of a sudden I needed someone. It is like everything happens for a reason, right? And you said, hey, I'm ready whenever. And I'm like, okay, so let's play around with your topic. And we're bouncing things off. And you said the leadership V factor. And I was like, what does V stand for? Because we're doing it through text. I'm like, victory, virtue,
What does it mean? Is it a
right.
shape?
I know the Venn factor. And that's actually where it started. But you were talking so much about living values through adversity. And so I was like, well, it's the V factor for values. And so that's how we name this. Um,
Yes.
so give us just a little bit for the people who don't know you, the people who may know you a little bit. Just give us a little bit of your background. Who are you?
Well, thank you for having me. First of all, it's great to be here. We do go back almost 10 years. Our paths have crossed kind of through the leadership training that you do and the leadership training that I've been through. But a little bit about me is, I've spent some time in a couple, basically two organizations in leadership roles. And outside of that, I've had the luxury and pleasure of working with leaders in other companies outside of the industry that I'm in. And because of that perspective, I've gained a little bit of view of what the world looks like. Because if we spend a lot of time in our own industry, 10, 15, 20 years, we kind of see the world through those lenses. And so I was very lucky to get experience and exposure to other people in other industries. So for me, it's hard to really put it in a nutshell. I am a mechanical engineer. I've spent a lot of time in the mechanical engineering consulting space in the private sector, working with architects and owners around the globe. It's been fun and exciting. Let's just say that. But the biggest accomplishment, I would say, or the biggest takeaway for me is working with a really great group of people that understand where you're going and how to get them aligned. That to me is the most fun.
Well, and currently you're a COO for an engineering firm, a publicly
Yes.
traded engineering firm, right?
Very large one. Yes.
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 And you've had 30 years within the business leadership sector. And so when we look at, living your values, right? The leadership V factor, values are so important. And yet at the same time, everyone is different.
Everyone
So
is different.
so talk to me about why this topic is important to you. Like, why are values important to you?
So when we have values in our personal life that translate into our business life, if we don't stay true to them, we get conflicted, right? And I see it, and it's happened to me in my past where I live for this, and then something happens, the economy, something happens in your industry, your company gets bought, something happens that you no longer get to live the way you want to live, and you get conflicted. And then you start to think about, how do I fix this, or can I fix this, or what are the rules that I'm living by? And then the what typically happens, at least for me in my experience, is you go into this place of fear. Oh gosh, I don't get to live the way I want to live, so what can I do? Right? Because there's so many things you can't do when you live in an organization where you're not the decision maker. It's nice to be the decision maker, but for most of us listening in and most of us in our career, we don't get to be the end all be all person. We rarely get 51% of the vote. So we have these constraints upon us, and we have to figure out, are the constraints that we operate in, either at home or at work, are they aligned with our value system? And if they're not, how do we adjust to that? Because there's a lot of give and take, because not everything can be perfect. So we have to figure out, if I like to live my life a certain way and I can no longer do that, at what point do I need to make a change? That's hard because nobody likes change.
Well, and you think about values, and you and I were talking right before we went live, is that there are different kinds of values, but
Sure.
values come from things that are so strongly embedded. Like our beliefs our values come from our beliefs, and a lot of times our values are taught so young by the people who have influenced us. But we have character values. It's how we operate in this world. They're universal laws, values. How do we operate as a human being? There's work values. So how do we value work and what we do? Is it process? Is it people? Is it, strategy? Is it everything? There's all these different values. And then there's personal values, which become our core values. And when you look at all these values and people are people, people get hijacked when they feel like one of their values is being taken away from them. And that's where we
Yes.
see so much of the conflict. So, what are your, so let's go actually into your core values. So, what are
Sure.
your core values?
So, you know, for me, the core values typically don't change, and we have to use language that's specific to us because I could use a word and you would define that word differently for you than I would. So not only do I have a core value, but I also have a little bit of a definition behind it. And one of the first ones, I only have four. Some people have three, some people have 10. I'm not really sure. I have four that I like to live by every day. My first one is really people centric. So I like to put others first. Now, that sounds weird coming from leadership that tend to be more alpha dogs, or if you've ever done a disc and values analysis, they tend to be the high D's of the world, the decision makers, they're driven, they're results oriented. How can that person be people centric? Well, oftentimes the driver behind that behavior for me is to make sure that the team is safe, to make sure that the people are good, to make sure that there's some sort of success that allows them to be successful in whatever they're doing. And so my high alpha driven leadership decisions may look really assertive, but they're really to make sure the team is safe. So if you were to talk to some of the people that have known me 10 or 12 years that I've worked with or in my personal life, they'll tell you that that's probably true. If you talk to people that just met me, they may think, well, he's really just alpha driven, wants results, let's go, go, go. And there's collateral damage along the way. So I have to be very careful with how I assert myself with the intention of keeping people safe. So for
Well,
me,
I can vouch for that. So it's funny, and I know I can go here with you.
yeah.
I was talking to someone who had just met you in that people centric. So I know your heart, right? I know that it's all about the people. You love the people culture. You love to learn and grow. Um, and people who just get to know you, it is that high D is driven, is dominant. It's like,
Talk
let's go,
fast.
let's take the hill, let's charge. And I said,
Yeah.
the analogy is, and I think some people will probably laugh at this, and it's in love, is that you're like the little dog that nips at the heels of
Yeah.
people and you just don't let go. And it is because you want something. It's like go, 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 go.
Yes.
And it's understanding that value is that that's your value, right? But sometimes you have people who are like, whoa, wait, I value peace. I don't
Calmness.
want change. I need calmness. So before you jump into the other ones, how do you manage that?
It's difficult. I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of people like you in my life that say, "Hey, that's great that that's how you think that this is your personality style, but there are other personality styles in the world, and they're not all like you. And it would be really beneficial to you and them if you could speak a little bit in their language." So when I'm around other people that are alpha high D decision makers, they talk fast, they read emails and bullet items, they don't read paragraphs, they don't write long emails. When I'm around them, we can talk like this. It's like machine gun fire. But when I'm around others that like to process information first, they need a little bit more data. I have to slow down. And so what I try to do is figure out the people that I'm working with or in my personal life and how they like to hear stuff and how they like to process information and then give it to them in their way. Otherwise, I look like a crazy person that's talking real fast, processing out loud and making six decisions in one sentence and they can't get on board. It's just too quick for them. And they're not bad, they're not wrong, they're just different because they have a lot of value to bring to the conversation. I just have to make room and listen and pause, which is hard for me.
Right.
So
So it's
that
awareness.
that's my toolbox is okay. I can, if I'm losing them, I need to be quiet and ask questions and get inquisitive because they're going to bring a lot of information to the table that I haven't thought about.
So how do you know if you're losing them?
Uh, I don't know. I think there are times I've lost people and completely blew by them and didn't even know it. It comes with training and being thoughtful about others because not everyone's like me. And I have to realize that when I get in this mode of machine gun fire conversation, I'm pretty sure the other person isn't keeping up. not because I'm faster, but just because not many people like that kind of dialogue. So I was somebody, I gave a town hall presentation to our organization once, and we do it every quarter. And I try to get feedback. What did you think? What did you like? And the people that like calmness have all said, well, you just talk. There's like no break. And then the people that like it, oh, that was really great. There's a lot of good information. It was a lot in 20 minutes. I don't know how you did it. And so it just depends on who the receiver is. So it's a lot about awareness training and learning about how other people process information that's unlike yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So what are your other values?
So you know, they're words that anyone can define. So we talk about integrity. Everyone's got integrity as a company core value or a personal core value. Great. What does it mean? It's doing the right thing no matter what. So integrity means when you're doing something and it's easy and everything aligns, well, that's great. Anybody could do that. But when you have to make a decision or you have to do something that isn't easy, but it's the right thing to do, you have to do it. That's a bit of a different challenge. So I believe, and you got to do the right thing no matter what, even if it means you have to leave your job or you don't want to, you have to give someone feedback that maybe they may not like or they're not ready for it, but you have to, present it in a way that says, hey, this is what I'm hearing. Maybe we can have this conversation. So for me, integrity is about doing the right thing no matter what. And by the way, these are my core values, and I'm not good at them on any given day.
I was just going to ask, do you live these 100%?
Oh, I attempt to live them. My intention every morning when I wake up is to live these core values. And usually by lunch, I've failed at almost all of them.
Yeah. Well, and we're
at some
people,
point.
right? We're
Yeah.
people. It's like, oh no, this is what I stand for. And then all of a sudden, ooh, that's hard. And then is it a fake value? No, no, no. It's really what I believe. You and I were talking also, I had just taken a course with Tony Robbins, and he said something that literally changed the way I look at values. He said there's toward values and there's away values.
Right.
So your toward values are those things that you absolutely, they're like non-negotiables in your life. And this is what you want and you stand for more than that, more than anything.
Right.
But your away values are the things that like you don't want those. It could be fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear that you're not going to be loved, fear that you're not good enough. And everything we do in life is pain and pleasure, right? So if there's something that's so painful, we do whatever we can to get away from the pain and go to the path of least resistance. And so the away value, if it is so painful, we actually sabotage our toward value, which could be our core value, or it could be our character value. It could be a work value, because we don't want to be rejected.
Right.
We don't want to look like we're stupid.
Yes.
And so that's so much where we get hijacked. And going to your point, I think a lot of times with people, when they want to live their values, and it's like, oh my gosh, why am I not doing what I know I'm supposed to do? If you really look at the away value, and is there so much pain within that? How do you change your value system with that, the perception?
And the tolerance of the pain also is a driver, because I can tell you that fear gets in the way of these core values for me every single day. And it just depends on what is your a tolerance for that kind of pain, because some people don't like any pain at all. If it's uncomfortable, they go the other direction no matter what. And some people have a big tolerance for pain, which means they can push through some of the pain to get to the right spot. It's really difficult, and I believe that fork in the road. I don't live my life through movies, but there's a great scene in A Scent of a Woman where Al Pacino is talking about his life. And at one point he says, I was at the fork in the road and I always knew what the right path was, but I never took it because it was too damn hard. And every day, myself, others, people listening, we all are faced with that fork in the road, and we have to have the fortitude to take the right path, not the path of least resistance. And I often take the wrong path, subconsciously, unintentionally, through fear, for whatever reason. You gotta get off that path and go back to where the right path is, which is back to this integrity thing. If you got to do the right thing no matter what, and it's hard. It's hard every day.
Well, and even within the business realm, what I see is a lot of times within organizations is that you have, whether it's budget, right? There's budget cuts, and it's just like, I have to fudge a little. and yet your core value is integrity. It's like, dang it, I'm lying to make the numbers work. Or you have a client, your biggest client, and things are going south, and all of a sudden it's like, and they're asking for information. Well, the integrity, do you tell them the truth? And you might lose them, so it really goes back into, and I really believe too, it's the pain and pleasure, it's the away or
Sure.
toward. And how do you stand in that value and do the right thing? How do you?
Yeah, it's a gray area because I don't think there's a right answer for any of that. If you think about marketing or BD, people that like to spin stuff, and in their mind, they're telling you the truth. They just put a spin on it. If you look at others, I don't know, in some more binary field where there's ones and zeros, they're probably just going to give you the straight shot, and it's not going to come out in any way that's even positive. It's just going to be, here's the answer, deal with it. So there's a whole gray area of how we handle that every day, that integrity of what is the right answer. And this is part of what we're talking about today, because at some point you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror. And when you can't, you need to make some serious change. I've been there. I've been to the place in my life where I looked in the mirror and said, that is not the person I want to be. And you got to make a decision on how you change that. And it's brutal.
So
It's a brutal.
how do you change that? When, I mean, because we all have stories. You look in the mirror and you're like, man, I stand for integrity. I stand for people centered, and I'm not able to live this right now, or I'm not living it. How did you change it?
Well, in a work environment, it's a little easier because you can just leave. I believe you have three choices every day in your job. Once you choose to accept your paycheck, you have to either accept the place you are, you have to fix what you have, or you have to leave it. So if you can't fix it because for whatever reason you don't have the authority, or nobody wants to change, or you simply just can't make the changes that need to happen, that's off the table. You're now left with accept it or leave it. In the work environment, now home's a bit different, but in the work environment, if you choose not to accept it, then your only choice is to leave it. And for me, only once in my career did I get into a place where I looked in the mirror and I said, I can't do this anymore. And I had to leave. I had to leave people that I worked with for 15 years. I had to leave people I cared about very much, that were good people, but I just could no longer do what I was doing. And I had to leave. And it was a very difficult time in my personal and professional life, but knock on wood, things tend to work out. You just have to get away from the trunk of the tree and get on the thin branches, which is not easy, especially when you're in a time of distress, right? So as leadership, when you're facing these value challenges, you have to have the fortitude to push through. And the bigger the challenge, the harder it is.
It's, I look at values and I always say your knower knows. Like, so you have this value and you're faced with a decision, and it's like, oh, and it's that gray area, but your knower knows. And I've done things in my life where it's just like, I feel sick. Like,
Yeah.
I feel sick. And I've actually had to go back and own it. And it's stepping back into my value. And I've also seen so many times with people that we work with, and myself included, when you stand true to your values and you leave that situation, like, doors open because you're doing the right thing. We get so stuck in the fear of, oh, it's the fear of the unknown, or fear if I'm going to screw up, or fear of, we need certainty, we need stability, and we're so afraid to make a change that I really believe sometimes that's where the compromising of the values come in.
Fear of loss, biggest driver in the world. People don't fear change, they fear loss. Nobody fears gain. Nobody fears gain. People fear loss. So when you're in that position and you have to do something, the thought of losing what you have, house, home, relationship, family, title, job, whatever it is, when you embrace the loss of that, it gets a little bit easier. But I remember shaking, like, what have I just done? What have I just done? And it's hard to hear people tell you when you're in it, it's going to be okay. And it's going to be a challenge for the next 6 months or a year or 2 years. It's going to be fun. It's so difficult to hear that because all you are thinking in your brain is, what have I just done? And this is not going to be good. And it's the biggest lessons in life, are the ones that leave the biggest scars. And 2008 for me personally, the global financial crisis was a huge lesson. Now, at the time when I went through it, I was like, oh, my world is crashing down. Now, it left some of the deepest scars that I could possibly imagine, but I benefited from it. So what I used to think was the global financial crisis was awful. And it was for the globe. Trust me, a lot of people lost a lot of stuff, and I'm not minimizing what others have gone through. For me personally, it was the best thing ever happened to me. The global financial crisis was the best thing that ever happened to me because the lessons I learned were so powerful. I've learned not to make them again. And that is hard to see. How many 13 years ago? You asked me that same question. How is this good for you? I'm like, what are you talking about? This is not good for me. Business is awful. Money's not great. Relationships aren't good. It was just a bad time. But you have to get through those, and you have to know that it's going to be better, because I'm pretty sure I need to do some math on this one, but I'm pretty sure I've survived 100% of my worst days ever. Right. And we 100% of my worst days ever, I've survived. And that tells you that you can get through these. You just have to get through them. And you need people around you that can help you through that. You can talk to them and lean on them, and they'll give you great advice, and you have to listen. But it all goes back to, you have to do the right thing for you. And from that, good things will happen. Hard to hear.
Yeah.
Hard to hear.
I just heard a quote, and I absolutely, it's like, I love quotes. And it said, adversity is the partner to progress.
Sure.
And it is so true. So you look at the adversities that you've gone through in life, you look at adversity that, people go through in life, and yet it is the partner to progress, because we'd never go forward if we didn't know, we don't have those lessons. And so many people, you talk about hanging on the trunk of the tree, right, where it's so safe and it's stable and there's no
comfortable,
right? It's comfortable, but there's no growth.
No.
And getting back into values, it really, our values are those defining, it's those guiding light to go, okay, so where am I going? What do I stand for? And what am I willing to do to get there?
So let's talk about growth for a second, can we?
Sure.
Because if you look at, I'm going to make this up. If you look at from the mid 90s to 2008, we probably had one of the longest periods of economic growth in the history of our economy. And prior to the mid 90s, I was much younger. Let's just put that out there. My career was in a different place. You get out of school in the late 80s, you don't have any money. In the late 80s, we had the economy had challenges. We had the Asia stock market crash. We had some, which impacted the US. And then we had the .com in 2000. That didn't impact me, or I was, because I didn't have any money. I didn't even know we had that. I mean, I heard about it, read about it, but it had zero bearing on my life. 9/11 was a big challenge for our country. A lot of stuff happened, and it was the first time I'm like, okay, this is a bit scary, but it didn't last very long, and it recovered quickly, right? Because it was an event. The country came together and we rallied, and we kind of got through it. So there was this very long period of economic growth. And when you're successful and you're working hard and making money and making progress, there's not a lot of challenges required to reflect on who am I and what do I want to be when I grow up. And so I had like this 15-year period of not a lot of growth, and I'm not real proud of it, but it was part of who I was. And 2008 happened, and it forced me to look in the mirror, and I had to make some changes in my personal life and how I looked at myself and my family and my friends. And I went through this thing, and I talked to my brother. I'm very close with him. I said, how, we look back on those days. I think 2 years later, 2010, I had a long conversation. I said, how could you let me make those decisions I made? And he laughed. He said, well, you wouldn't have listened anyway. Right? So I didn't have a lot of growth. So I had a lot of deferred reflection that happened in a very short period of time between 2008 and 2010. And there was an enormous amount of growth because of all the pain that I had to go through to get there. It was I call it deferred maintenance, because when you have a long period of no growth, you end up having a really traumatic event. Usually at some point, you're going to pay for it. And that's what happened to me. And that's when actually your path and my path actually crossed, was during that time. And that put me off in a completely different trajectory. And that path, although it's had ups and downs, has been far better than the old path that I was on. And so I've learned the hard path is often the path to take, even though I don't always take it. So that whole thing about growth is, I was comfortable. I had, a business that was doing well. I had some money in the bank and fancy toys, but there was no growth. And I didn't learn a thing until after it all went away. And then I'm like, oh, now I get it.
So
it
doing
about
that
stuff.
during that time were your values still the same?
I think they were the same, but it didn't require me to take inventory of them because it was easy. I didn't have to think about, am I people centric? I just was, because people were doing well and we were growing the business and people were getting promoted. And it just, I didn't have to reflect on it because everything was just coming at you. You didn't have to think about do the right thing no matter what, because it was easy.
Right.
You didn't have to think about what am I really passionate about, or am I really committed to this, because it was just going. It was a flywheel effect, just a momentum that carried you through. You didn't have to stop and take inventory. What do I really stand for today? Until things stop. So it's good until it isn't. And then when it isn't, then you go, whoa, what really drives me? And if you don't do that, you're going to get stuck. And it's hard.
I just keep thinking there's no growth in the comfort zone, right? And that's where it is
Zero.
easy. And
Yeah.
we like it. We like our comfort zone. We like the easy things, but we're not challenged. So we can't even develop our character in who we truly are because we're just going through the motions. And I remember, and I've said this before, doing what we do within leadership development, there were times that I'd watch people go through adversity and my heart would just crumble. Just like,
Sure.
oh my gosh, I just wish I could take away that pain. And yet on the flip side is what you're talking about. That's where you discover what you're capable of. That's where you discover what you truly stand for. Those are the times that if you lean in and you let go and you get up on those skinny branches and go, where's the fruit that I'm going to pick? Those are doors that open up and you discover things that you've never discovered about yourself. And so my mind shift completely changed to,
Yes.
it's okay, embrace the adversity. Yeah, sometimes adversity sucks, it really does. And I'm not
Awful.
saying I don't have empathy, because I do. My heart still bleeds for people, but it's like, what is the lesson? How do you shift? How do you pivot? What do you really want? Because in those times you get to find out who you really are and what's important in life.
And what you stand for. I have a theory that times of adversity, you gain confidence for everything that you just said. During times of comfort, you gain ego, which is really not good, because everything's coming your way and you just think, well, it must be me. I must be right because I'm successful, but you're probably not. And not that anyone that's successful can't be confident, and not they all have egos, but it's easy to fall into that trap. But the times of adversity is really where your character builds and you discover who you are. And if you don't have a really good personal board of directors, it was a phrase that a friend of mine, Bradley Waldrop, just threw at me last week, and I really love it, which is, who is on your personal board of directors? If you don't have that group, adversity is going to be really hard. And that group needs to ask you questions like, hey, are you sure that's what you want to do? Or you're not showing up very good. What's going on? That's the board that you need, not the board that says, oh, you're really great, and how's, breakfast. That's not a board of directors. So the comfort zone is the fun time. And I'm not saying always be in times of adversity, always find conflict, enjoy the fruits of your labor, enjoy that, but don't be afraid of the decisions that take you down a path that are more challenging than just having fun all day.
So, talking about your values and understanding what drives you, and now you dive into teams that you lead. And we spend so much time at work. For those of people who are on here who work, we spend so much time. We actually spend more time at work than we do often in our home lives.
Right.
And values collide. They're different values, and when I look at values and why people get hijacked, there is a need. We value something. Every single person is different.
Yep.
And when we get hijacked or triggered, it's because we fear or feel like one of the things that we value is being taken away from us. And it's like, wait, this is who I am. This is my identity.
Yep.
And you take that concept into Gallup's poll, the state of the American workforce, with the engaged, disengaged, and actively disengaged employees, managers. And I look at just the state alone, and this was pre-pandemic, 70% of the US people who work are unhappy in their jobs.
Yep.
85% worldwide. Do you believe there's a direct correlation when values aren't aligned?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I think it's leadership's responsibility or even obligation to create an environment for success to occur. I don't believe leaders create success. I believe they create the environment where success can happen. And if leaders don't start thinking in those terms, they're going to get 70% disengaged. And they're going to be people that show up for a paycheck and are just really not being the best version of themselves. So our job isn't to tell people, as leadership, it's not to tell people what to do. Our job is to say, okay, how can I help you be successful? Now that's a people-centric person in me, right? First of all, you got to find some really quality people. And I believe in my heart that most people are really qualified. They just have to be in a place that allows them to be great. And so much leadership crushes the people in the organization because they want their agenda. They want their answers. They want to drive what they want. And if you just stop and take a breath as a leader and say, okay, if this is where we want to go, how do we get there? Let's engage these people. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I work with a lot of leaders and a lot of companies, and the ones that are most successful are the ones that engage their team and do the things that the team has decided that they didn't think was the right thing to do. You cannot be married to your own ideas, which goes into one of my core values of commitment. The best idea wins, regardless of origin.
That's where ego has to get out of the way.
Ego's got to get out of the way. And that's hard because as a leadership role, whether you're a manager of a group or a leader of an office or a CEO of a 5,000 person company, if you can't let go of your ideas, there's a big challenge you're going to have with your internal engagement. So I believe there's an absolute direct connection, A to B, of how engaged are your people and how are your core values aligned. I've had experience with two offices in the same organization, and one office is completely dysfunctional and hard to be in. The people are good and they're smart and they're well intentioned, but nobody is aligned. The other office, completely different. And it all has to do with, can we create a place for them, for this group of people to be successful, and how do we align the core values and make sure that we have an engaged team, because it is a problem in America.
Yeah. So looking at just that example, how do you, so have you ever, and it sounds like you did work for a company where your values were not aligned,
Yeah.
and you are in a leadership role and you have this driving force, that DI, so on the desk, that driver determined we're going to take the hill, and then the people side like, come on, let's go along with us. And knowing an engineer mindset often are not that way. They're more process driven.
Yeah.
And yes, they could be a type A personality, but it's all about accuracy and we're going to do this right. How do you create an environment where your values, you're able to stay true to them? And when someone else doesn't align in leadership and they're staying true to their values, how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, that's a tough one because my values aren't the only good values. They're just my values. There are other values that are good that you can have in the organization that aren't yours, and that's okay. What you can have is values that are conflicting with yours. So if I'm people centric and there's a bunch of people in the organization that don't care about anyone but themselves, that's going to be a big road to haul, right? So the Navy SEALs, 12 go out, 12 come back. It's not 12 go out, I do my job, and if you guys come back, great. That isn't how it works. And so in that particular example of a core value, you have to make sure that there's certain fundamentals on your team that can at least work together. Because I've got 4 core values. There could be 6 others that work with mine, but if you have 3 in direct conflict, right? If someone doesn't have integrity, that's a big problem, right?
So
So
how do you work with that? Because I'm sure that you've worked with people in all the years that they don't,
yeah,
but you
so
still have to work with them.
so when you, in my opinion, my humble opinion, when you create this environment where success is going to happen, you have to create a culture of the people in the group that have core values that at least can work together. And if you don't have that, then you have to fix the culture. The problem is, this is where people are going to get uncomfortable. There's only one way to fix a culture, and that's to change the people, because you're not going to change their values. And there's only 2 ways to change people that I know of. One way is to fire everybody and hire new people, which is completely disruptive. The other way is to dilute the culture you have, which is bring in people that you want to work with, that share your values, that have values that supplement the values you have, that create this culture and this environment that you want. And then as that occurs, the people that are uncomfortable end up leaving. Now, there's an example in my past of a really great engineer who was super smart, and our company was evolving and the culture was changing over time into something really great. And this particular person in the beginning was perfect for the culture, but as it shifted, he didn't grow with it. And at some point, he left. And it was unfortunate because he was a great engineer and he was really smart and he had a big heart. He just didn't believe in what we were doing. He believed in command and control and everything must be micromanaged. And we believed in set the results and let the people do their job and figure out how to get it done. And let's have some metrics and some KPIs behind how we measure those results, but let's just get out of the way. It wasn't how he was wired. And it doesn't mean he's a bad person. So when you have this group of people that aren't aligned, you got a big problem and you're going to have to find a way to fix it. And I believe that culture is king. And without a good culture, it doesn't matter what your core values are, you're going to have problems.
Well, and you have to know what the culture is. A lot of times people look at, oh, I need to change my culture, but they're not even really 100% sure on what they want it to be,
Right.
because culture is so much of the unwritten rules. And, when you talk about changing the people, and sometimes you do need to change the people, but sometimes it's the analogy of the crab in the pot, right? You have good people, but the culture keeps pulling them back in. And all they have to know is that they're heard, that they're valued, and that it's changing with them, and giving them a chance, because sometimes it's not about just changing everyone. Sure, sometimes there's people who are can't, the cancer in the
Right.
organization.
Right. And I just to be clear, it's not like just because someone disagrees means they have to go. It means you have to give them the choice to be part of something great, and then they get to choose whether they're part of that or not. Right. So I do believe that there is a way to help people along, but at some point they have to make a choice. You got to make a choice for them. Either they're on board or they're not, and you got to find a way to work with them to say, this is where we're going. I've worked with, I don't know, 10 or 15 different leaders over the last few years in different organizations. And yeah, we have a great culture and here's what we stand for. Okay, great. You give it to the leadership team, you go, hey, can everybody please write down the vision, the mission, and the core values of the organization? And I can't tell you, I don't have my spreadsheet in front of me for the math, but I would say 80% didn't get it right. And I'm like, well, if if your leadership team doesn't know your vision, then how could you possibly be aligned? Right. And we all know that an aligned leadership team is a competitive advantage. But if you don't have that, at least on what the vision is, you got a problem. So let's set the vision. Let's talk about what the mission is. Why do we get out of bed every day? Let's talk about our core values. If we don't have that foundation as a leadership team, then everyone's rowing in a different direction on the same boat.
Yeah.
And I see that a lot and I find it funny.
So as I keep asking Vic questions, if anyone has specific questions for Vic, just put them in the Q&A. I also have the Facebook Live up, so if you have questions on Facebook, I can read those as well. So give me an example of someone whose values were not aligned with yours. They brought so much strength to the organization, and it wasn't like it wasn't like an integrity thing, but
Sure.
they just stood for something different.
Right.
How did you work with them to take your strength and combine it with their strength to create a competitive advantage?
So I have a belief that every business has a leadership team that really kind of falls into three buckets, which is a Venn diagram that I like to draw. That everyone makes fun of me because I love Venn diagrams. It's kind of what this V factor thing kind of started out, because it's really, there's three circles and they kind of shape like a V, but uh, there are business focused people in every organization, whether they're CFOs or they manage money or they're looking at project management and EBITDA and profit and loss. That's kind of the financial side, the business side of what we do. There are delivery people in every organization. We either deliver a service or a product. We either make widgets or provide a service. And then there are client facing people in every organization, which are either externally business to customer, or they're internally focused with other people in the organization. I think if you put all three of those circles together, where they intersect in the middle is the culture of your organization. And I think that is where you get a competitive advantage. If you have a leadership team that's only financially focused, and I'm going to make fun of all the accountants, which I'm probably going to get some flack for. I call them the soulless bean counter that reduces everybody to a number. That's an unfair description. I get it. But really, if you only look at the numbers, you lose the sense of the people and you lose the sense of business decisions. And my example is this. If I own a grocery store and I ask someone who's very financially focused to come in and analyze my business, they would say, "Oh, well, I noticed that you throw away more produce than you sell in any given day, but I also noticed you make 300% markup on your cereal. So why don't we just get rid of all your produce where you lose money and put in 5 more aisles of cereal and you'll make a ton of money?" But the problem is no one will come to your store.
Right.
So the financial people that only look at the numbers are incredibly valuable to any organization in the context of how to deal with our customers or clients and how do we deal with the delivery of our service or our product. So a leadership team needs to find those that supplement their strength. So it's a very long answer to your question, which is how do you bridge the gap with people that have other values? It's the same thing as if I'm strong in this area and you're strong in that area, why don't we supplement each other's strength as a leadership team to make a great organization? So my core values may be mine, but if there are other core values that are beneficial, let's accept those and say, okay, those are yours, these are mine. There's a little bit in the middle. That's a good thing. If they're conflicting, let's have that dialogue and find out why. And that's where it requires some fortitude to sit down with someone and say, what do you stand for? Here's what I stand for. Here's where your strengths are. Here's where my strengths are. How do we work together to make this better than working individually? Nobody likes to talk like that because everyone wants to be a rock star. Everybody wants to do it individually. Look at me. Look at my truck. You're better as a team than you are as an individual. No one of us is smarter than all of us. End of story.
Well, and that goes back into you have to drop your ego. And it's to admit, I don't know everything. I need you to come alongside me, but go arm in arm so that we actually are moving together using each other's strengths.
Sure. And the strengths don't mean one person in each circle or three. You can have more leadership balance, not by quantity, but by result. If you have one or two people that are really strong financial, but you need 5 or 6 that are client facing to balance out your team, that's okay. So it's not 1-to-1. It's how do you get that balance that you need in your organization to drive your business forward without trying to be all three at once, because nobody has the bandwidth to be all three at once unless you're a one person show, and that pretty much is going to suck up all your bandwidth. That's just going to be a tough thing to do.
So I have a question for you. Kirill asks, what is your why?
Someone who's been reading Mr. Simon Sinek is what I'm guessing. It's a good question. I have a why that I get up with every day, and I don't read it to myself every day, which I probably should. I should probably write it down and have it somewhere, but it's to have uncompromising compassion in the pursuit to inspire others and leave a legacy through their achievements. That's what I wake up to do every day. How do I help others be great? How do I help them achieve things? That my legacy isn't through what I achieve. That isn't really why I do stuff. I like it. I mean, I like to accomplish things. I'm very tactical when it comes to that, but really that's my why every day is. And the reason I use the word uncompromising compassion is because I can race right past that and get to the results we want and how do I help others be successful. Here, go do this. That's the knee-jerk reaction. So I intentionally put in the words uncompromising compassion because it forces me to pause. Now, in the last 45 minutes, I haven't paused very much because I'm so excited to be here. But those two words slow me down, which allows others to be part of the solution. So, uncompromising compassion in the pursuit to help others and leave a legacy through their achievements. And I like to apply my serial optimism and enthusiasm to make a positive impact on the people in my life. So one is kind of business centric, one is kind of personal, family, friend centric. How can I help those, and how can I learn from others at the same time? That's my why. I don't know if it's too long of an answer, but that's how I wake up every morning. And if I could do that every day and monetize it, I would be the happiest person on the face of the planet.
There you go into your values. If I can
Yeah.
monetize it and help every people every day. Well, actually, you said people first.
Yeah. There you go. If I could help everybody and monetize it, I'd be happy. But it's hard. You could do one, but the other one is kind of tough. And we all have basic needs. We have to have a place to live and, food and all that stuff. So there's a certain amount of compromise that happens between, could I do that? I could do that every day. I could just go on a street corner and talk to people all day long. I'd be broke, so we got to find that balance of how do we do that?
Well, and I love what you said, the uncompromising compassion, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we know there's times that we're like, oh, I stand for this and this, but what's the one that we need to develop? What's
Yeah.
one, two that's like, oh, if I actually stepped in and I embraced that value, it would create a completely different result in my life.
Sure. Yeah.
Tracy wants to know, explain the image behind you, hugging fog.
So Hugging Fog is a podcast that Bradley Waldrop and I do. He's one of the people on my personal board of directors that challenges me every day, asks great questions. I love him to death. He and I do this podcast, and we put questions in a hat, and we pull the questions out, and then we talk about it for 20 minutes. And it's launching live, I think, in a few weeks, where people can listen in and they can send in questions. And then we talk about politics and personal growth and relationships and family and friends and business. And he's one of the smartest, most switched on people I know. And I'm really fortunate to be able to be part of that. So that's what that is. The name really is kind of like, what we do on a daily basis is so not definable. And that Hugging Fog kind of describes what humans do every day.
So how does that tie into your values?
Well, for me, it allows me a platform to inspire others, maybe just a little bit. Maybe if one thing I say resonates with someone, then that's a win for me. And I feel really good about that. I may not know if that happens. I know that when I talk to people like yourself or anyone that I'm in a conversation with, they will unintentionally say something that I pick up on and I take that away. And they may not even know it. But if I can do that on this podcast, then it's good enough for me.
Okay. So where's your biggest area for growth?
That
was a deep sigh.
Yeah, I knew that, it's been 45 minutes. I'm surprised it took you this long to get to a hard one. These are all tough questions. My biggest area for growth, in 2011, it's vulnerability. It's just I'm insecure, and I'm not as vulnerable as I should be, as I want to be, and as I need to be effective. Right. So it's hard to put yourself out there emotionally on an island and not have any safety net. I struggle with that every day. It's not that I'm not genuine or authentic. It's just, it's hard to be in a place where you say, I don't know, or I'm scared, or I need help. Those are hard places. I had a friend of mine take me to lunch in 2010, and he said, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. No, I wasn't fine. It was a disaster. The global economy was a mess. Finances were a mess. Work was a mess. I was not in a good place. And he said, well, I don't think you're in a very good place because you're not showing up. And here's what it looks like to me. And he went into this long speech about who I normally am and who he's seeing now. And he actually recommended I go talk to somebody about it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Now, I eventually, a few weeks later, called him back and thanked him for that and listened to his advice. And it was very beneficial. Now, a month ago, I still talk to him. A month ago, I called him and said, remember that day we had lunch and you said this to me? And he said, no. That literally changed my path of my life, which is amazing. So it takes a lot for me to share those stories and be vulnerable because it's just not how I'm wired. And some people are maybe more wired that way than I am. But that one conversation at lunch put me in a different trajectory, which led me to you and your group in 2011.
Wow. Well,
so my challenge every day is that.
We're messengers all the time, and we're not even aware that when we speak. You know, and you said something before we started this. You said, "Well, who want to listen to me?" and and I so believe every single person has a message. That's why we started Leadership Now, is that we bring people to share what's their passion, what's their message, how do they want to help people. And with you, you're a messenger for so many people. I'm like looking at all of the different comments that are happening. I have a couple more questions for you. Sam Nicholson is on here.
Ah,
Who were the
Sam.
people in your life that made you a better person?
Okay. Who are the people in my life that made me a better person? Jennifer Miller, who's upstairs. She's one of the best people in my life. I love her to death. Uh, my family, my brother and I are very, very close. So he's always been that person who's been able to say, don't do that. So my brother, obviously. Um, Oddly enough, one of them is a work person that I met 10 years ago, Dwayne Miller.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know Dwayne. Dwayne has been talk about uncompromising. He's chipped off a lot of rough edges that a lot of people wouldn't even attempt to start chipping at. And he's like, no, he sits you down, he comes right at you, and he comes from a place of love and compassion. So it's acceptable once you get through it, but when you're hearing it, it's not easy.
Mhm.
So he's one of the few people that have sat down on multiple occasions and said, no, 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 no. This is not how it's going to go. And you need to really think about this. So you talk about board of directors, you know, those are the people in your life that are important. And Dwayne and I no longer work together, but we still talk. Sometimes it's about life, family, friends, how you doing? And sometimes it's about some pretty tough topics. But those are the people uh, that I are big influencers in my life. And I'm very lucky that I met a group of guys I grew up with in Virginia, where I was living at the time when I grew up, and I've known them since like the fourth or fifth grade. We've been friends for 40 years, and we're not friends like let's talk once a year. We're friends. We get together every couple of years. You know, we go fishing. We all hang out. We see each other quite often. We're all intentional about calling, and now we're doing Zoom calls to stay in touch. When you know someone that long, they've seen you go through the ups and downs, the highs and lows. Those people are brutal
Well,
because they don't. They're like, listen, dude, this is not good.
they want you to be authentic.
Yes, they
We
will not.
crave,
They will not let you off the hook ever.
yeah, but we crave people who are authentic. And yet that's Brene Brown talks about vulnerability. And that is one of our greatest fears, but it's our greatest strength because people want to know, hey, you've been there? How
Yeah,
do I get there? And they look at people who are perfect and they look like they have it all together. There's a piece of people who are like, well, I can't do that.
yeah,
They inspire us, but they don't inspire us to dream more, do more, be more because we don't know how they ever got there. And it's people like you are like, you know what? I don't know it all, but let me find out. And I'm going
right,
to own my mistakes.
sure.
That's where the authenticity, the connection, the trust is built. Um, Sam has another question. He says, how do you think your work impacts our team and company?
How do you think what?
How do you think your work impacts our team and company? So I'm assuming
Our
he's talking about Grand Canyon.
got it, got it, got it. Yeah. So I think so Sam is a friend, and he runs a fantastic organization. I know that you know him. The one things that's really attractive about Sam and Vincent and everyone at Grand Canyon is that he has created a team and a culture that is completely aligned with what you and I are talking about.
Yeah.
They do constant training. They have great dialogue. They call BS on each other when they need to in a professional, respectful, and caring way. Sam has created a team that I'm not so sure I've seen in a lot of organizations. So I'm not exactly sure how I understand if I understand his question, but I can tell you that I like to work with like-minded people in my professional life. And when you find them, you need to hold on to them. It doesn't matter where you work as long as you're working with them. I may not be where I'm at today, I may be somewhere else, but I will always find those like-minded people and gravitate towards them.
So being a like-minded person, and this is my understanding of his question, being like that, having similar values, how is that impacting him and his company?
Well, I think I think it might be more of an indirect impact than direct, but it allows us to have dialogue and meetings when we're on if we're on opposite sides of the table that are meaningful. It doesn't mean you're in conflict or battle. It just means, okay, This is what they're saying. Here's what I'm saying. Let me get inquisitive about what that means. Maybe the question is, tell me more, not here's why you're wrong. And when you're in a business setting with people like Sam and his team, you can ask that question. Tell me more. I'm not so sure I understand that versus no, you're wrong. And here's why I'm right. Let's do battle. And as soon as I win, my ego will be better and you'll be wrong and I'll be right. And that's the zero sum game. And I don't believe in that. I know Sam doesn't either, and neither does his team. So that's what's great about working with Sam and Vincent and his group.
Well, and it's seeking to understand.
Sure.
And the whole thing going back into the leadership V factor, right? How do you live your values during adversity? It's anything. It's whether it's frustration, adversity, it could be conflict, it could be, today sucks. It is, but it's staying true. And when you are with like-minded people, you can seek to understand. It's the ego doesn't get in the way. It's not I'm right, you're wrong. It is, and I love the analogy. There's a book out called Fierce Conversations. I think I've talked about this before, and it's something that stuck with me 20 years ago. And she talks about, we look from our point of view. So a beach ball, she gives a concept of a beach ball. I'm looking at red. Everything I see is red. So my values, my beliefs, my experience are all red, but you're looking at yellow, and your values, your beliefs, your experiences are yellow. But the truth is somewhere in the middle. And we go,
Absolutely.
wait a minute, how do we blend this? How do we understand? What are
Yeah.
you afraid of? How can
Well,
we help you?
right. And when you work with a group of like-minded people, it's okay. When you work with a group of like-minded people, the environment that you're functioning in is different than when you're in conflict. Because you do get to say, I'm not sure. Tell me more. How do we figure? What do you think? That's a different environment than I'm right and you're wrong. And that's what I enjoy about finding people like Sam and his team, because when you find them, the results are far better than conflict.
So true. All right, so we just have a couple minutes left. Just wrapping up, I always say I give you your soapbox, so to speak. So your final thoughts, what's your message that you want to share?
Well, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it. It's been super fun. It's amazing how nervous I was before it started and how quickly an hour goes by. But the message is for me is, everyone has something to offer. Be authentic, be genuine, try to be vulnerable as you can. It's a tough one, but as leadership in your personal and professional life, you have to lean into that adversity. It's not easy. It's not comfortable, but it's what you have to do for yourself and for those around you so you can all be better. That's my basic message. You got to lean into that adversity as hard as it is.
And just remember, adversity is a partner with progress.
There you go.
Rusty says, how are you a 99D and a 99I?
Rusty and I can have that conversation later. I'm definitely both of those. It just doesn't sound like it here today, but like I said in the beginning, the driver behind my high D is the people. And that is kind of where the I comes from. The I is kind of a little bit different. If you do a disc analysis, you'd probably think I'm more of a high S. But really, I've taken that test or that analysis 5-6 times, and it just doesn't change. It's always a high DI, always.
Yeah. Well, that's who you are.
That's who I am.
So for those of you who are on the live webcast, I just put up a poll just for feedback. And I have a question on there if you'd like to connect with Vic. And I know Vic loves to connect with people. So
yes.
If you have some people who say they'd like to connect, I'll definitely give you their information. Also, I had someone asked if this presentation will be available to watch again later. Absolutely. It stays on both Vic and my Facebook Live. We will also put it into our YouTube by the end of the week, our YouTube channel. And we also convert it into our Apple podcast. So yes, it is there. And again, I just want to thank you, Vic. I've loved this. This has been fun. And I really believe that this conversation is so important to have because so many people don't stop and pause and look at the deep stuff, right? So what do I stand for? And even seeking to understand, where are my people? What are their values? How do I bridge that gap? And we don't know what we don't know, and things like this help bring it to life and just help remind us, okay, today's a new day. How do I get up and shift and pivot? So
sure. No, well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been super fun.
Absolutely. And thank you everyone for being on here, and we will see you next week, 9 o'clock.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.